There are so many parts of US and global culture that come from Africa. We've been exploited quite a lot, so we don't get a lot of the credit for it. There's so much cool stuff happening, and all the top musicians and artists and filmmakers in the world are looking here. They come here, they scout for talent. One of my greatest compliments was YouTube came to do a global event at AMPD. They brought their entire global team, and they said to me, don't tell anyone this, but your space is better than ours. The lawyer who took pity on us, he gave us this list of things to do, and he said, listen, you do this in this order, exactly as I've written this, or you will go to jail. The universe works in mysterious ways because it was such a dark time. I'd never been in such a dark place, but it changed everything about the trajectory that I've been on, and has really sort of made me powerful.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
So, Jon, I really didn't know how to start this conversation until I heard that you were a criminal. And now I want to talk about that. Are you a criminal, or am I taking liberties with that statement?
It's I walked a very fine line. But one of my favorite possessions, mine and my business partner in life, is this CCTV footage that we have of us breaking into this studio and stealing all the equipment. And we even stole, because we were clearing our tracks, we even had to steal the CCTV box, which we didn't realize it was of us. But when we went and looked at the CCTV, because we were also looking for clues for other stuff, there is us like breaking into the studio. And it's one of the great and tragic moments of my life that I thought was the worst and ended up being the greatest, and has led to most of the journey that I've been on.
Why did you think it was the worst and it turned out to be the greatest?
Look, there's a story behind this. You know, have you ever heard the term narcissist?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I know a few.
I didn't know. I just thought that was an insult that you said to people, not realizing that it was an actual personality type. But the short version is, for many, many years, me and my business partner, we had this vision to create an empowerment hub for young creators in Africa. And that would be like a space where creators could have access to gear, to other awesome people, for networking, for masterclasses, for all the stuff to build themselves from. And we came up with this idea. We managed to get some brands involved, raise the capital. We spent more than 2 years building this place in downtown Johannesburg, Maboneng. We literally built it with our bare hands. It was this incredible studio space. We bought a vintage SSL mixing console, one of the most sought after mixing consoles in the world. And we built it into this art gallery, so that if you were in the art gallery, we weren't the art gallery, you could look into the studio and see the recording studio. It was a beautiful concept. And as we opened the business after 2.5 years of this, we got absolutely screwed over by the third business partner, who I now realized was a complete narcissist. It set us up from day one, and we lost our entire business, the entire thing. And as these narcissists are, even after we'd lost everything and left the business and were like bankrupt and in a really black hole, dark space, very, very sort of not knowing what we would do, we actually, there was an advertising agency that we had worked with before that sort of came to us and said, we love what you guys are doing. We'll just pay you to come work here. And we ended up building a whole commercial department for them. But in that dark period, this guy would continue to harass us. And I just had a kid, and my kid was just learning to talk. And after like 6 months of being harassed by this guy, I was this like shivering wreck. Whenever I went anywhere, I tell everyone not to post pictures of me on social media. I didn't want anyone to know where I was. Wow. Scared of everything. Some of my kids' first words were words to do with this terrible incident. And I realized that day, right, I'm going to have to fight back. And the short version is we went to war proper war. And we went to see a whole lot of lawyers, and these lawyers gave us, they gave, because we couldn't afford them at the time either. The lawyer who took pity on us, he gave us this list of things to do. And he said, listen, you do this in this order, exactly as I've written this, or you will go to jail.
Wow.
So we had to do, and it was like this big setup where we had to do all these things in the right order and send this email to the guy and send minutes to all this stuff and book these things. And one of the things we had to do was break in, and there was a legal way to break into that space, even though the locks had changed. And one of the things we had done was secretly crept in during the day and changed the alarm code, because the alarm code we had set up, right? Yeah. So anyway, we had, it was this sort of legal thing where we had to claim that the business was in danger and protect all of the equipment. So we had to put it under this claim of protecting. So we were in this building all night long, the two of us, wrapping every cable, packing every instrument, a huge studio. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, this truck, 7-ton truck arrived. We plowed it all into this truck. We sent it off. And as we drove out, we had this email scripted by the lawyer that we had to send to the other guy that said, listen, because of this and this and this, we fear for the equipment that is legally owned by the business. Right. And as like the directors, because we'd left the business and resigned, but we hadn't signed there was like all this gray area stuff. Anyway, the gear from that, then we sold all the gear and bought it all back a year later and Amped. So all of the gear at Amped, which is now 5 years old, beyond that, that is now the most thriving, biggest empowerment culture hub on the continent, with 15,000 people there, community there, that we help hundreds of podcasters every day. That is one of the sort of pride and joys of my life and what's happening in Africa, that has transformed thousands of lives. All of that gear and all of that concept came from that studio, and we kind of hustled it back together, back to life. And it made me believe in karma. It really made me believe that the universe works in mysterious ways, because it was such a dark time. I'd never been in such a dark place, but it changed everything about the trajectory that I've been on, and has really sort of made me powerful. Not powerful like ego and strength, but really like powerful as understanding that the universe has a flow, and you just gotta go into the waves. Sometimes you got to fight back. It was a very amazing experience, and I've never spoken about it before, because I don't know what the statute of limitations of the crime is, but there's no going back.
Well, you had a good lawyer.
Well, he wasn't. He was like a really angry lawyer. I liked him because he was badass, but he was always swearing at me, saying, shut the fuck up. He would always say, like, I'm talking. Like he said, you can't afford me. This is what you have to do. Don't mess it up. And off you go. And we took this pages of stuff, and we did everything. I could spend an hour. So I said, I could spend an hour telling you the actual story. That's such an abbreviated version. Sure. You could kind of write a book on the details of what we had to do, what we had to go through, what we were doing. Yeah. It was epic.
That'd make an incredible book or movie for sure.
I've always thought so. I just was always scared to talk about it, but I feel right now that it maybe enough time has passed.
So in a moment, we have to get into AMP Studios, Africa Podcast Network. But before that, you mentioned this guy was a narcissist, and you were kind of playing small, didn't want to post. You were kind of afraid. You didn't like where you were in life. And then you made this big move. Did the narcissist disappear? I feel like he would get beater.
I feel like I could write a book about narcissists, and I've now, I'm sure a lot of people can. I've now encountered a few in my life, and I have some friends who are also having very tricky times with some at the moment. And that really prepared me, because there are a couple of things about narcissists, if you want to get into this topic. But first of all, it's a specific. I mean, you might know this. I'm not a professional. This is just my personal experience. I just thought it was a term that people used to either just say like that person is obsessed, but it is such a particular personality type, very particular. And the more you actually deal with one, the more you understand their strengths and weaknesses, and you see how you have to beat them. And there is a couple of ways to beat them. I think I got lucky because usually, depending on the danger factor of a narcissist, if you have a dangerous narcissist, which I don't think I had one, the only way to beat a dangerous narcissist is to let them win or make them feel that they've won. So you've got to kind of give them whatever they're looking for, as long as it's not control of you, because that's the vehicle, although that's usually what they want the most. So sometimes, there's no getting out of it. But if you understand how a narcissist operates, and I remember so clearly that every move was so aggressive, and he set me up with stuff, and everything was like, I lived in fear because I was attacked from all sides. And I didn't realize that there's no, in my opinion, even these smart narcissists are super duper smart, but they're kind of dumb because there's no substance behind the aggression. It's all aggression, and the intention is to make your life miserable. And so as soon as you don't allow it to make you miserable anymore, because it's a power struggle, if you can wrestle your power back and shut them off, like literally shut them off, unfriend them, and probably the problem with them, I don't know how we get, why we're in this topic. But the problem with narcissists, they get into your brain, right? Yeah. So you kind of become obsessed with them. I think it's where abusive relationships come from. You become obsessed with dealing with narcissists. So it's, you want to you're too scared to block their number or not see what they're doing on social, but you got to kill it all, because that's the power. The power is that they know they control you. And as soon as they can't control you anymore, there's nothing they can do. They disappear, because that's the game, to control you. And if they can't control you because you've just turned yourself off, then you win.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this for days. It's a beautiful thing, though, but tying it into business now, to bridge into business first, I feel like a lot of us want to fix things. We're problem solvers. We see someone has some quirks. We see the best in them. We see their potential. It's very difficult for an untrained professional that doesn't know the first thing about narcissism just to go fix a narcissist. So if you have narcissists on your team, if you're partnered with narcissists, it's probably going to go poorly, it seems like.
Well, I've got a funny opinion on that. I think if you understand a narcissist, it's very useful. If you have a narcissist, there's good narcissists and bad narcissists, but it's knowing, it's actually identifying them that is the key. Okay. Because they can be very helpful in business if you understand what they are and how they operate. The problem is that, and this is where this is why I think this whole situation changed me dramatically. Like you just said, I always believed in the best of people. Yeah. And I always believed that everyone's intention. And where I wrestled the most with this narcissist was constantly coming back to the idea that surely he will see reason, and surely he will. And I was scripting these voice notes that I would rehearse before sending them to him, appealing to his sense of humanity. And that doesn't work. And it's you have to kind of recognize this is what you have. It's tumultuous. They're hard negotiators. They're very aggressive. They're very smart. And if you are negotiating with a narcissist, you have to sort of dehumanize the objective. And you can do really well when you dehumanize a narcissist in a negotiation. But they, if you're a human being, they know all the buttons to push. And the game is they exhaust you by pushing your buttons to death. And if you can't have your buttons pushed, usually you'll win in the negotiation, I think. I mean, I sound like I know what I'm talking about, and I really don't. It's just, that's been my experience of the few that I've had to deal with.
I love that you're sharing your experience. I'm trying to think of a segue, Jon. We'll talk about something we both know a little bit more about, and it's podcasting and content. And so you mentioned AMP Studios. First, give us the very quick geography lesson, because I'd say about 80% of the listeners are in the United States. Where is AMP Studios located? Literally, where is it located?
Okay, so it's literally the south, very south on the African continent, which is that one continent in the middle on a map, right?
It's really big. It's a really big one, continent. Yeah. That's why I asked.
It's a very amazing continent. And what is interesting about Africa, we've had a huge impact on global culture, music, fashion. There are so many parts of US and global culture that come from Africa, but we don't have a lot of infrastructure, and we sort of have we've been exploited quite a lot, so we don't get a lot of the credit for it. So it's often like culture is kind of stolen in a way. And that's happened a lot. One of the big ones in movies is like Wakanda, an American movie that came and sort of made a fictional African movie that a lot of Africa was offended by that movie because it should have come from here, not, So Africa is a very rich creative economy. There's so much cool stuff happening, and all the top musicians and artists and filmmakers in the world are looking here. They come here, they scout for talent. There's a lot happening here, but very far down south, what we lack, we're sort of diamonds in the rough for talent, but we have very little infrastructure, and that's why very few artists break out. And that's why we built AMPD, which is like infrastructure for the creator economy. And to your actual question, very far down, as far south as you can get in South Africa, there's Cape Town. But the north of South Africa, which is if you're in the southern tip of Cape Town, it's about 1,500 kilometers north, right before you leave South Africa up the north.
Yeah.
There's the capital called Johannesburg, which is a landlocked, huge, sprawling, massive city, not unlike LA, that's just got it's just big and sprawling and vibrant and exciting. And in downtown Johannesburg, there is a place called Newtown where all the creatives live before they break out, like they can afford to live there. It's a huge creative community, and it has history going back in the history of African jazz, in the history of African theater. There's so much history in Newtown. And right in the middle of Newtown is our studio, AMP Studios. And it's a huge double-story building with world-class recording studios, TikTok studios, 6 podcast rooms, a live event space, and everything is free there for creators. So it's just like a hub of business and creatives and stuff. Everything is free? Everything is free.
How is that made possible? Is it funded? You tell me. How is that? That's unbelievable. It's amazing.
One of the philosophies around it was we didn't want to be an NGO because NGO, in my experience, from in just looking around this region, I don't know about the rest of the world, most NGOs spend most of their time fundraising and not the time spent on the thing they're trying to do, spend on the fundraising. So we wanted to build a commercial model, which we've done. So we have these commercial partners, and they're integrated in super cool, lightweight ways where it's a really big value for the brands we work with, and really big value. One of our partners is MTN, like one of the biggest cell phone networks in Africa. They do so much for the community, and the community is so much back. It's a brilliant symbiotic relationship. And then we have a lot of other partners that are working there. But the spin-off of it is that when we first opened the studio, we had this idea that we were going to have a little like couch that people could sleep on if they were going to be working late in the studios. And we had a little bar that we set up. And within a week, we killed the couch and killed the bar. And we're like, no, this is a workspace. If we're going to teach people to be business people in the creator economy, we're going to open at 9, we're going to close at 6. And then by having brands in the space and present, it kind of forced a level of professionalism, kind of tough love professionalism, which has been instilled into the culture of AMPD. And because there are people like brands around that you can meet and do a deal with them, it's changed the kind of posture of the place. It's not like just a creative space, it's a business space around the creator economy. And that wasn't by design, but it really has made AMPD into quite a special animal.
I love it. So let's have a little bit of fun. And I know the answer is it depends and probably 15 different things, but you unlock the door in the morning, you walk inside. What does a day in the life look like? You have influencers and celebrities and podcasters. You've got TikTokers. Like what is a day in the life? We could do a documentary just on this, right?
Well, I can show you video. I can show you a 2-minute video that will. So what happens at AMPD on a daily basis
Yeah.
is a lot of stuff. So we've just built, well, not just in January, we built a new studio box right at the entrance because there is a guy who approached us who wants to beat the Guinness World Record for the most amount of songs released in a year. That's 1,000. He's 1,000 songs released in a year.
So a little over almost 3 a day.
Three
Almost,
a day.
yeah.
But the Guinness World Record people said that one of the stipulations of building this of breaking this record is he had to do it in a public place. So we built him this big glass booth right at the entrance of AMP. So when you come into AMP, the first thing you see is this guy in his studio trying to beat the Guinness World Records. And because the place is so thriving, he always needs collaboration. So like if you walk into AMP, you could end up on one of his tracks today, which is really cool.
Well,
There's a coffee shop in the middle that's also owned and run by our staff members, which is really cool. That's a new thing we started to do, training some of the staff to learn to run their own businesses. And that's really cool. Then we have downstairs a couple of pod rooms. They all have kind of different things in them. We have an AI-driven pod room. We have pod B. We have hot desks. And we also have this big, beautiful stage. So the stage, which is really cool, the whole stage has lighting and sound all built in, and it's all operated from an iPad. And the reason is it's like super easy for anyone from the community to walk on stage and start doing either an event or a podcast, because a lot of people like to shoot their podcast on the main stage as well. So that's all happening. So what's happening there are a combination of events happening. We've just had a weekend of dance, like schools doing TikTok dance competitions at the studio. I'd say we're 70 to 80% podcasts now, and it's a range from the biggest podcasters in South Africa to mid-level podcasters who are trying to break out, and people who just said, I've got an idea for a podcast, I don't know where to start. And that's happening there. And they kind of get different kind of levels of attention and gear depending on where they are. And then you go up these big stairs, these big yellow stairs to the upstairs. There's instruments everywhere. We've got a gaming room, which has never been a gaming room. It's just turned into like an editing suite for podcasters. It's called the games room, but doesn't have any games in. We've got, and so that's usually editors. And one of the things that's happened at AMPT is that we don't do editing, but we have these free machines that have editing software, both music and video. So these kids have started businesses. As people record their podcasts, they come out, they offer to edit their podcasts for cheap, and they do it on our system. So there's this micro economy happening up there. Then we've got the live room, which was built as a world-class recording room. And every hour it changes into something else. Either an artist is recording there, and then a podcaster comes in and it becomes a set. And then a meeting goes in there. And then some TikToker goes and turns it into a TikTok studio. And then a YouTube filmmaker. That room is very dynamic. Then we have the control room, which is where our big mixing console is. And everything in the whole building is connected to the mixing console. So you can record to it from any room. And then we have another couple of pod rooms and an outdoor area. So at all times, something is happening. If there isn't an event in the main space, then people are in all these rooms doing other spaces. But it's booked 4 months in advance. It's kind of, people are complaining that it's hard to get in at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's very cool and vibrant, all like youth led and super cool. That's kind of, that's Tuesday. Then on Wednesday,
4 months in advance. So obviously the community has accepted it with open arms. It's helping plenty of people. Are you going to open new studios?
So look, I don't have an agenda for this phone call, but for this interview, but our model is really cool.
Yeah.
But what we're actually trying to do with AMPT has become such a hero. It's done so much, both commercially and for the community. We're trying to find a method to duplicate this model in other territories, but it's quite an expensive thing to do. It took a long time for us to really understand it. And the kind of money I think we need to do it properly is not going to come from South Africa. Brands are relatively cautious. And so we're sort of looking to see what are the right either commercial benefactors or partners or commercial partners in the rest of the world because the dollar to the rand is massive. Like the rand is very weak at the moment. So we are starting to look at people from the arts community, brands who are looking to infiltrate Africa to see how do we duplicate this model. There's nothing like it anywhere. And one of my greatest compliments was YouTube came to do a global event at AMPD. They brought their entire global team and they said to me, don't tell anyone this, but your space is better than our big YouTube hub. And so I know we're onto something and I know that the model works, but I'm not complaining. Like it's quite hard to do these big projects from here. So yeah, I'm not quite sure how to do that yet, but it's been on the cards and this year we're like ramping up this thinking.
Well, listen, Jon, I know you didn't have an agenda. I didn't either, but I'd be foolish not to ask for the people that are curious. Are there currently ways that we can donate, support, add to this is platforming independent artists that might not be able to afford studio time. I want to donate. I know my US dollar is worth pretty good money. I'm lucky to be American in that sense. I want to support you. You don't have things in place for that yet?
We don't work on donations. I mean, I don't know if I'm being stupid because I'm trying to find...
Possibly, Jon. I want to give you money right now.
Yeah, but I'm trying to find a model. What I'm trying to do is find the right model. What has happened is...
Yes.
This model, it's taken 5 long, difficult years to really understand the power of the model. And that it works really well and everybody kind of understands, but it is a sort of, we have a couple of pressure points that would put us out of business pretty quickly. And I'm trying to find a sustainable way forward on a bigger level. And the reality is it's not cheap to do what we're doing. And why I say I might be short-sighted, I don't think donations gonna, I'm not looking to help getting through the next month. I'm trying to find something that's going to secure AMP for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of doing the work the government should be doing, but we don't work with government and we don't want to. And so, again, it's food for thought at the moment. I don't have the answers. All I'm doing is we're having conversations with people all around the world to say, how do we work together on doing this? And there is a commercial upside. It's more like an investment, really. Like if someone would buy shares in AMPD, it would both be great for them, great for Africa, and commercially viable. Yeah.
We're going to dive more into the fun stuff again, but one more question on this, because again, me with the money in my pocket isn't going to work wonders. Obviously, donations go a long way, but if someone's listening, and again, this is just food for thought right now, as you said, if they have ideas, how do they reach out with you with their partnership ideas? What's the best way to reach out and maybe present a solution?
I mean, just email me. I'm a very simple email address, info@africapodcastnetwork.com. That's going straight to me. And I respond to all emails. Most of my emails are from all different kinds of crazy people, but I won't ever ignore an email. So if you send me an email, I'll respond.
info@africapodcastnetwork.com.
Yeah, nice and short.
Back into the fun stuff. I ask those questions more for myself and specific people I know that want to help for a mission like this. But
cool.
When we talk about creatives coming out of AMPD, can you name drop anybody? I want to put them in the show notes. I want like a follow-up binge where I can go and check out maybe some of these podcasts, maybe some of these TikToks. Has anybody gotten big through AMPD?
Massive. The massive. So, I mean, one of the early podcasters that I started working with in AMPD in the early days that doesn't stop working at AMPD because he just got massive and built his own studio and is the biggest podcaster on the continent is Mac G. Currently, our podcasters that are massive that recorded AMPD is DJ Spoo, SBU, DJ Fresh, Penwell. He's a monster. It's called the Gold Pen. Also we have major news and publications like the Daily Maverick and the Mail and Guardian are also doing their podcasts with us. I'm sure I'm forgetting really important people now.
Sure.
But they're really, really incredible podcasters that come through Amped.
So I'm here nodding as you say the names. I don't know any of these people yet, so I'm
yeah.
gonna go to my own show notes. I have a fantastic rater. We're gonna go to the show notes and check some of these people out coming out of South Africa.
Yeah, great podcasters. So DJ Spoo is like Hustler's Corner. He's like a young entrepreneurship, and he's a massive inspiration for young entrepreneurs.
Wow.
Penn is one of the most incredible podcasters. He's quite controversial. He's just a very thoughtful person who sort of touches the nerve of the pulse of what's happening in culture in such an incredible way. Like, he's just on culture, and he just talks to people, and it hits all different ways. And Mac G is sort of like I guess a Joe Rogan-esque thing. He's like the absolute podcasting king. He just interviews celebs, quite a wacky, out of the box, controversial. I mean, he is such a good interviewer that people have confessed to crimes and then been arrested on his show, and that's happened more than 2 times. It's pretty out there. Yeah. So,
wow, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So, creatives, a lot of us I even talk about it all the time with my podcast and with other people's podcasts. A lot of us don't necessarily monetize the podcast. We don't always make money as a creative. We monetize something else. Maybe we're a consultant. Maybe we do a service-based business. Maybe we do creative stuff, but we have a day job as well. You're good at the monetization stuff. So enlighten me and the listeners. How do these creatives possibly start a podcast and actually make money doing it? Is it doing the things that I just said, or are they making money as podcasters?
So this is my real wheelhouse, right? This is where I get very, it's, if I rewound myself many years, I wouldn't believe that I was saying this, because I was a pure creative once upon a time. And I was in a band that traveled the world for 6 years, and I was a filmmaker and a podcaster from very early 2009. And so frustrated with this question as I started to try and figure out how to build a bridge between what I was doing and monetize the damn thing. And then sort of through this crazy situation, and found myself, I got picked up by an advertising agency in that dark time, and ended up being an absolute sort of commercial person, and left the agency to start a business that was to build the bridge between creatives and understanding how both of those people think. And have been doing that for 10 years or longer now, and really understanding that pain point. And our network, the Africa Podcast Network, and even Amped, everything in my business is about building that bridge and understanding. And I think it's very interesting when you've been in both rooms, like when you've been the creative complaining about the brand, and you've been in the room with the brand complaining about the creative, and see how they're mismatched. And I think I guess it's kind of sales knack, but understanding the reality of your situation and understanding what you're trying to do. There's so many confusing and incorrect thought processes that creatives have about what is success, about what is the minimum number of listeners we might need to commercialize. And the reality is that if you really understand the brain, this is what I always say to creatives. And my podcast, I started from zero, and it's just an example. I'm not patting myself on the back. I started a fun podcast in lockdown. And from the very first episode, I had a sponsor for the first year of that episode. And all I was doing was following the same stuff that we're talking about now. And that is, you need to understand that brands can only see themselves, right? And and if you want to commercialize any of your art stuff through a brand way. So I'm a fan of the brand. I didn't used to be, but I see that the economy, the whole world is changing right now. And it's changing into the pocket of creators. Creators are getting more power. If you look at Joe Rogan, and I'm not saying any good thing, but as a market indicator, he's 3 times bigger than CNN, right? 3 times. And that doesn't mean anything about Joe Rogan. What it means is that creators have power that major networks used to have. And that's the major shift. But the monetization models are broken, and Netflix are finding out, and Spotify are finding out that these subscription monetizations and donation models, they're not sustainable. But the thing that is emerging from the dust is partnerships with brands. And I'm finding, so I've done 3 television shows in partnership with brands, my own come out of my head dream television shows that the television station would not commission, that no one would touch. But by getting brand partnerships, I brought these things to life. And we're on a 3rd season of one of them. I've created careers out of these things. And it's by understanding the nuances of, like, when you approach it, like finding the right brand fit is really important. Understanding the reality of your situation, not puffing yourself up and trying to pretend you're something that you're not, because brands can see right through that crap. And understanding the brand's pain point and making yourself the answer to the pain point. One of the questions podcasters ask me all the time is like, what's the minimum number of people I need to commercialize? And that isn't the right question, because the way I see it is that Facebook and Google ads, they dominate reach. And reach is such an important metric. Fuck knows why. But are you allowed to swear on this podcast?
Oh, absolutely. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So they obsess.
I actually have the explicit tag, and we never swear, so we should swear more because I'm already explicit. So let's do it.
Brilliant. So
Please
these Facebook. So what they do. So because of the panic that brands are in, they're spending less and less, and they spending more on Facebook and sort of YouTube. They're putting a lot more spend there, and that gives them very wide reach. But it's not giving them substance, right? It's not giving them depth. It's giving them width. And podcasting is one of the few mediums that offers depth. So they will still spend their money on Facebook and YouTube, but if they want to get closer to an audience, then the only way they can do that is podcasting. So they can say, I've got my width, now I need depth. So your relationship with your audience, even if it's 1,000 people strong, it's the right 1,000 and it's strong, it's more powerful than someone with 50,000 that don't have that depth. And like I said, brands are trying to get closer to culture, and podcasting. I mean, I'm the preacher for podcasting, but I believe there are no other media out there that can do what podcasting does. That during the downfall of the advertising universe, that podcasting is the answer. It's why I'm so obsessed with the model and what we're doing. So it's a lot of hope for podcasters to be investing in their content, investing in their audiences, and being really patient about what they're building. Because I think you can get in on the ground level. There are smaller brands. There are ways to promote, to approach brands from the beginning. But I know I'm just hopping on here, but if there's one thing I can tell you about creatives, most of them think that they need to pitch their idea to the brand. Brand doesn't give a shit about your idea. They care about your audience only. And that's such a thing that just because I'm on this side, I thought that was obvious. But I have to say that every single day to someone who doesn't, I've got a great idea for a podcast. Can I pitch it to you? Don't care. Brands don't care, right? Make it. Focus on your audience. There's no gatekeepers. There's no Netflix or MTV to tell you no. The only people going to tell you no is your audience. If they don't like what you're doing, they're just not going to tune in. So go and win yourself a small audience. Now you got a gold mine, and you can monetize it accordingly. That was a long answer to a short question, but this is this is an exciting space where I think a lot of people think that it's the selling out space. It's not the selling out space. It's the best space, because you are building your empire. You're securing your future. And I've got lots more to say on this, but I'll breathe and let you talk.
We'll talk more about it. The one thing that came to mind is you mentioned MTV. No one's watching MTV in 2024 anyways. If you turn on MTV right now, you'll see ridiculousness. They play it 20 hours a day, but that's beside the point. In this day and age, you talked a lot about the why. You talked about understanding the what the brand wants, and ultimately what audience, like how can we help this audience, and use podcasting as a bridge, a channel to serve this audience. Not Ben's big vision. It's not Jon's big vision. It's here to serve the audience itself. How do I actually get this deal? Like, what am I saying to them? Who am I reaching out to? Let's spend the last segment here to get a little tactical. Like, who am I reaching out to? What do I say? What do I charge? Am I charging per listener? How do I know what to charge? Like, most of us don't know any of this. And if we go in asking the brand to do it for us, we're not going to look like a marketer. We're not going to look like a professional. I presume we want to go to the brand with a plan. What is our plan?
Okay, great question. Love this question. It depends where you are on the spectrum. Why the APN, why we formed Africa Pod. I'll start at the top end and then I'll answer down to like the independent podcaster who has a small niche following. But on the larger end to high performance podcasters, I mean, you'd think they have it easy, but they don't. Because they're actually the big podcasts with a lot of views. They kind of have their own issues, and it's why we started APN, because they're big, but they're not big enough, brand big. They're not radio big, right? So why we started APN was to solve a lot of the problems you're talking about now, and that is there's no regular charge. Like no one knows how to charge on that level. And second of all, they're not big enough to be big, and they're not small enough to be small. They're in the cracks. So every brand deal was done like personally, and to get a proper brand deal of that level can take like 2 to 3 months. So it's a lot of investment to get a brand deal. And so we said, all right, we're going to just collect. We're going to sign the top performing podcasters around, and we're going to represent them as a conglomerate because collectively they have scale. But we're going to let them, they completely retain their own independence. We don't have any of the IP. But we represent them as a conglomerate. And what we've managed to do with them is sort of formulate a costing structure based on a premium. So we consider a podcast listener premium way more valuable than television or radio or a digital footprint. Because one of the problems that brand media has is that we're in the gray area between traditional media premium and digital media, which is like pop-up ads. And most of the budgets that podcasting gets come from the pop-up ad side, not from the radio side. So it's a whole different thing. So we've managed to figure out a sort of CPM usage and how we're going to charge for those medium podcast, the larger podcasters. But as you get down below, the best thing to do in the sort of bottom tier of stuff, and when you're getting started, is to figure out an amount that you know is going to be useful to you and is also easy enough for a brand to take a risk on you. And what I did with my podcast as an example was I started a frivolous podcast called What's Your Poison? And I really like whiskey. And that's why I've got all these autographed whiskey bottles down here.
Wow.
And the idea was I just wanted to I know a lot of musicians and podcasters from my time in content. I just wanted to introduce, it was during COVID when they actually had banned alcohol as well. So I thought it'd be nice and naughty. And what we did was I wanted to do a show where, and the insight for me was, most celebrity people have done 1 million interviews. So it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to get something new out of them. But if you go out with them, after they've had 2 shots of whiskey, they start telling you stories that they've never told anyone.
Sure.
So my idea was to do a 45-minute interview where we were drinking and taking it easy for 15, 20 minutes. In the second half an hour, we went in deep when they'd had a few drinks. Totally silly. I had no commercial intention. It was something I wanted to do.
Sure.
But then I went and approached a whiskey shop that specialized in unique whiskeys and would like really specialized whiskey called Whiskey Bros. And I did a deal with them, and the deal included some cash, enough for me to go like that's going to make it's going to be really helpful to me. And in addition, what we did was they sent a bottle. They chose the whiskey each week, and they sent a bottle to me and a bottle to the guest. So we opened the same bottle, and it worked for everybody. And
brilliant.
And why I did that was because I understood the show that I was creating. I didn't have any commercial attention. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew the audience that I was going to be speaking to. And I knew that my passion particularly was whiskey. And so that was an easy thing to say. I want to find a partner that really fits with this, that I can bring value to, not brings value to me, that I can bring value to. And that was the big part of it. And I kind of think the podcasters who are not just doing sit down interviews with celebrities, because that is dead, that is absolutely oversaturated, but who've got something really cool to say or fun to do or something, they can easily find a brand by thinking about what are the things that are unique about what I'm passionate about that I can bring value to. Is that helpful?
Really? Specifically the bourbon example, the whiskey examples. I'm thinking to myself, like, bourbon in business. I've got a business podcast. You call it Bourbon in Business. Even if it is virtual, even if they don't do it and I have to do it, even if I mail them, who's not going to want a free bottle mailed to their house when they're jumping on your podcast? Great way to build a relationship. If I started Bourbon in Business, I'd probably almost immediately have a different sponsorship and niche capacity than just business connections or business show. I think it's brilliant.
Well, I'm going to say for you though, you're a different animal, I would say, because I think one of the really big
tequila for me, you mean? Tequila?
That's what I was going to say. I think one of the really powerful markets, and it's something we are now pivoting big time to invest in, is this B2B market that you're in. Because there are brands in B2B that no one knows how to cater for. Now, it's easy when you're Coca-Cola and or like example brands like bourbon brands, whiskey brands, whatever. But B2B, if you're a B2B brand, you have very, very limited space to talk to your audience, except for on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, in my opinion, I've done a lot of LinkedIn marketing and it really doesn't work well. And to be like, what podcasts like yours really have the ability to do is to find like, I think there's really big money in this, to find a tech company who specializes in like, I don't know, HR tech or something, and where are they going to advertise? Now you speaking to, well, I don't know your audience, you know your audience better, but let's say you're speaking to businessmen or people who run businesses, businessmen and women who are medium level. I'm not saying this is your business, but just say your podcast is talking to mid-level businesses and this tech, and that they are willing to pay huge money to get that product in front of that audience. And so I kind of think the B2B market is so untapped because they don't know where to go. And the B2B podcast market is the place to be.
And you touched on it, everybody's trying to get your attention. There's so much noise out there. And a podcast, it's almost like the podcaster can be your preacher, non-religious, but you listen to them. I feel weird. I'm like playing small right now, thinking about the concept that someone listens to me for thousands of hours. But I know I've listened to other podcasters for thousands of hours. So quite possibly people are listening to me for tens, hundreds, thousands of hours. And then there's these businesses. I'm like coaching myself right now, by the way, John. There's these businesses out there that are scratching, trying to get attention that they can't quite get. I already have that attention. So I think part of it is understanding your own value and then presenting that value to the business with their audience in mind, and then finding a mutually beneficial way to collaborate and make it monetizable.
Hell yeah.
I'll drink
to that.
Before I have a closing question, before we drink to that, how can I continue to support you? We already put some notes of the things you mentioned in the show notes. But
just what's the best way? My friend.
That's it? What about the listener, though, who's just met you, John?
If you wanted to support, I have a podcast as well. It's called The Digital Savage, and it's about podcasting, AI, and tech. They're short episodes. They're just like, I'm like you. I loved what you said earlier. I get frustrated with theory. I want tactical. I want specific things that I can action and move forward. And so I started this podcast That is very, very specific tactical stuff that you just can't ignore that will help you now. And yeah, that's kind of newish that I'm sort of still getting off the ground. You can check that out. You can check out ampstudios.co.za. That's ampdstudios.co.za. There's nothing you can do to help there, but you can check it out. Tell your friends. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Closing question.
Yes.
What's your sip of choice? You've got nothing but a big old ice cube and a small glass.
Circular big one. Yes.
What are you pouring in that glass?
I think one of my favorite bourbons is Blantine's. Do you know Blantine's?
Not offhand, no.
It's a very nice one. It comes in like a circular bottle.
Yeah.
The beautiful, and has a little horse on a cork on the top. But I'm actually like a Jack Daniels man at my heart. And the whiskeys I like are sort of in the bourbon Jack Daniels kind of sweetie range. But I'll tell you another quick side story before you go is that you can't see it, but in front of me, I've got crates up to the roof of this whiskey because a friend of mine who moved to Canada asked me to keep them for him because someone owed him money and they couldn't pay. So they confiscated their like priceless whiskey range. I must be honest, some of them have disappeared by magic, and I'm not sure how that happened.
You got to stop exposing yourself on air. I love it. I know what is it in your time zone? It's like 10:30?
It's 10:30 right now, yeah.
All right, get some sleep, man.
Ben, man, I just want to say before we go, it was so lovely to meet you in DC. I'm so glad we got to chat on your podcast. And I would love to chat off your podcast as well into the future.
We will. And for anyone who just heard that, Jon and I met at Podcast Movement 2024. Right. Was in DC. I think they have a session that's going to be in Texas, a session in Chicago. Don't quote me. DM either of us. And quite possibly both of us will be at another one of these conferences. You're traveling across the globe. I'm just traveling down the street in the States here. But let's all get together sometime. And whether or not the listener comes and hangs out, you and I are going to be getting together. So that'll be fun.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Thanks, Jon.
Honor, Ben. It's an honor. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.